I'm gonna be real here. This is a robbery. This was a robbery. And we're gonna ignore A'ja Wilson here because A'ja Wilson, we're not questioning A'ja Wilson. A'ja Wilson deserved it. She deserved Player of the Week in the Western Conference. We are not questioning that. But coming into this weekend, I was like, okay, who was the Player of the Week in the Eastern Conference? I'm like, okay. People were asking me who it should have been. And I was like, you know what? Based on the fact that after game one,
Stephanie White stood there, eyes fixed on the screen as the announcement flashed. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a calculated insult to everything her team had built in just 1 week. The WNBA had finally done it. They had snubbed Caitlin Clark in a way that defied every single logic-based metric available to the public. You could feel the air leave the room as the realization set in that the fix was officially in. This wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about protecting a narrative that the league wasn't ready to let go of. Stephanie didn't just see a missed award, she saw a blatant robbery that threatened to undermine the integrity of the entire season before it even really got started.
It's week one. A ridiculous week for Brittany Sykes. You can go and give it to Sykes. And I was like, maybe Citron and Caitlin. They were top three. Somehow, the third best player, or sorry, not third, the second best player in Liberty, and I don't care what anyone says, you can quote a box score at me. I watched the games. Pauline Astier was the best player for Liberty this week. So far this year, Pauline Astier has been probably the best player for Liberty. Like, you know what I'm saying? Oh, but the Liberty are 3-1. And I get that. But like, the Liberty have had the luxury.
The decision to name Breanna Stewart as the Eastern Conference Player of the Week over Caitlin Clark sent shockwaves through the Indiana locker room. Everyone knew what Caitlin had just accomplished, averaging a staggering 26 points, 9 assists, and a block during a historic record-breaking start. It was the kind of performance that usually guarantees a trophy, a headline, and a seat at the head of the table. Instead, the league looked at those numbers, looked at the massive impact she was having on the global game, and decided to give the nod to a veteran who hadn't even been the most consistent player on her own roster that week. It was a slap in the face to the new era.
It was horrific against, I think. Actually, no, Stewie was pretty okay against the Mystics. And in the Connecticut Sun. Like, the Liberty, outside of the Liberty, Portland, and Connecticut Sun, they've all only beaten each other, except for Mystics have one win against Indiana. Sonia Citron, you could argue, was absolutely robbed, but maybe Sonia Citron, there's a bit of, you know, she was completely another dog shit against Dallas. So maybe there's a little bit of that. She just focused on defense.
Stephanie White knew the truth, and the transcript of the league's logic didn't hold up to even the slightest scrutiny. While Stewie is undeniably a legend, her performance that week was arguably the third best on the New York Liberty. If you actually watched the games instead of just quoting a box score, you saw Pauline Astier and Maureen Johannes carrying the load in ways that Stewie simply wasn't. Yet, the WNBA remains desperate to push the established faces of the league as the only ones worthy of the spotlight. They want to maintain the status quo so badly that they are willing to ignore a rookie putting up numbers that we haven't seen in the history of this professional organization.
We could be on MVP watch. But if we are rating, like, if we're ranking MVP right now, Stewie's like 7th. I would have Stewie right now maybe 7th in my MVP ranking. And like, that's not a knock on Stewie at all. Like, it's just she didn't have the greatest week. In a week where, if you watch the games, Pauline Astier and Maureen Johannes might have like, genuinely might have been better. Maureen Johannes.
The numbers for Caitlin Clark were undeniable. 26 points and 9 assists per game is superstar territory, regardless of how many years you've been in the league. But the WNBA seems to have a different set of rules for their Golden Girls. When you compare Caitlin's output to Stewie's 23 points and 8 rebounds, the gap becomes clear, especially when you factor in the playmaking. Caitlin is the entire engine of the Fever's offense, while Stewie has the luxury of playing on a super team. Stephanie White saw this coming, but seeing it actually happen was a different kind of pain. It felt like the league was telling her star player that no matter how hard she worked, the ceiling was already fixed.
An overall bit of a disappointing one to see, where I'm like, not only was Caitlin robbed, Alicia Gray was robbed, Sonia Citron was robbed, and heck, fuck it, even Brittany Sykes were was robbed. This is just, I'm like, everyone being like, oh, A'ja Wilson choked with the game personality. Yeah, but like, nobody cares if you choke. First of all, if you have Chelsea Gray to bail you out, no one cares in the clutch. And you are like,
but the robbery didn't stop with Caitlin Clark, and that's what made Stephanie so incredibly frustrated. The Eastern Conference was stacked with players who outshone the eventually chosen winner. Look at Alicia Gray in Atlanta, who was torching the league with 25 points per game during that same stretch. Or look at Brittany Sykes, who put up a ridiculous 40-point game and averaged 30 over the week. These are the types of performances that define a player of the week, yet they were tossed aside in favor of a safe corporate choice. It's as if the league office has a pre-printed list of winners and they refuse to deviate from it, no matter what actually happens on the hardwood.
Gray to bail you out, no one cares in the clutch. And you are like, I mean this when I say this, like, people do not understand how much A'ja Wilson stat padded in that unanimous MVP year. Everybody in the WNBA stat pads. Everybody does. A'ja Wilson versus playoff teams averaged like 20 points per game that year. The Aces were the 4th seed. Like, until the Seattle Storm choked, the Aces were the 5th seed. It was looking like they weren't even going to get home court advantage, while A'ja won unanimous MVP on a team with Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, Tiffany Hayes, Alicia Clark. So
there is a growing sentiment that the WNBA media is terrified of the A'ja Wilson mafia. While A'ja deserved her Western Conference honors, the culture surrounding her awards is intense. If A'ja is even remotely in the conversation, she wins the award, period. The league knows that if they don't give it to her, they'll have Becky Hammon calling them out in the media, and the entire team showing up to the next game in protest jerseys. It's a level of internal politics that makes it almost impossible for a newcomer like Caitlin Clark to get a fair shake. The Veteran Protection Program is in full effect, and it's creating a massive divide between the fans and the front office.
She'll win it for a conference. If A'ja is even close to winning an award, like, to win an award over A'ja, I don't think people understand. You have to be so much better than A'ja that it's not even a debate. If A'ja Wilson's in the conversation for an award, A'ja Wilson has won the award. Because the media knows if they don't vote for A'ja Wilson, or if the league knows if they don't give any award to A'ja Wilson, I'm saying this is an opposite one, because A'ja Wilson did actually deserve this. They know in general, if A'ja Wilson is even in the conversation and you don't give it to A'ja, you've got the damn mafia after you, led by Becky Hammon in the media. A'ja Wilson doesn't win a DPOY, she doesn't.
Stephanie White has watched as the league ignores the context of these wins. The New York Liberty had the luxury of playing the Washington Mystics and teams that were struggling to find their footing. Stewie was even described as looking horrific in some stretches against the Mystics, yet she still walked away with the hardware. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark is facing the most intense defensive pressure in the history of the league, being hounded full court every single night and still producing historic numbers. To ignore that level of difficulty while rewarding a veteran for a mediocre week is the definition of a broken system. The bias is no longer hidden, it is being paraded.
A'ja Wilson did actually deserve this. They know in general, if A'ja Wilson is even in the conversation and you don't give it to A'ja, you've got the damn mafia after you, led by Becky Hammon in the media. A'ja Wilson doesn't win a DPOY, she doesn't deserve to win. Becky Hammon calls it out in the media, and the entire team shows up to the next game wearing A'ja Wilson jerseys in protest. Like, it is, you know what, in fairness, the team are absolutely ride and die for her, and that's a good thing. But yeah, Caitlin robbed, fucking Citron robbed, Sykes robbed.
The conversation around stat padding has also started to surface, specifically regarding how the league's elite are protected. There are claims that players like A'ja Wilson are allowed to pad their stats in the fourth quarter against playoff teams just to keep their averages at an MVP level. While everyone in the WNBA does it to some extent, the discrepancy in how it's perceived is wild. When a rookie like Caitlyn does it, she's called unpolished or selfish, but when the established stars do it, it's called dominance. Stephanie White is tired of the double standards that seem to shift the goalposts every time her rookie gets close to a major milestone or award. It's scary how bad the defense can be in this league when people aren't paying attention, and yet the awards don't reflect that reality. Players like Lexi Brown have struggled significantly on that end, but the narrative often skips over those flaws to protect the league's image. The same thing happened with Stewie's week, where her defensive lapses were completely ignored because she's a face of the league. If we are ranking the actual MVP race right now based on performance alone, some analysts suggest Stewie wouldn't even be in the top 5. She might be 7th, yet she's still being handed awards as if she's the undisputed queen of the court. The fans aren't stupid, and they see exactly what Stephanie White sees. They see a player in Caitlin Clark who has changed the economy of the league in less than a month. They see the sold-out arenas and the record television ratings. They also see the box scores that show she is outperforming the veterans who are being handed these accolades. When the WNBA chooses to ignore that reality, they aren't just robbing Caitlyn, they are robbing the fans of a legitimate competition. It creates an atmosphere of cynicism where people start to wonder if the games even matter, or if the winners are decided in a boardroom before the tip-off even happens. Stephanie's frustration boils down to the fact that Caitlin Clark is doing more with significantly less help. The Liberty have a roster filled with all-stars like Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, and Courtney Vandersloot. When Stewie has an off night, her team can still cruise to a win. Caitlyn doesn't have that luxury. Every point she scores and every assist she dishes out is earned through blood, sweat, and double teams. To see that effort dismissed in favor of a player who choked in clutch moments during the same week is a bitter pill to swallow. The league is sending a message that being a name matters more than being the best player on the floor. We saw this same thing happen a couple of years ago with Sabrina Ionescu. If a big-name star is even remotely close to winning an award, the league will find a way to give it to them. It's a recurring theme where the media and the league office coordinate to ensure the right people stay on top. To win an award over someone like Aja or Stewie, you don't just have to be better, you have to be so much better that it's not even a debate. Caitlin Clark reached that level this week, putting up numbers that were objectively superior, and yet the league still found a way to move the goalposts. It is an unbelievable level of gatekeeping. The impact of this snub goes beyond just one trophy. It sets a dangerous precedent for how the Rookie of the Year and MVP races will be handled. If the league is willing to ignore a 26-point, 9-assist weekly average now, what will they do at the end of the season? Stephanie White knows that she has to fight for her player because the system clearly isn't designed to be fair. The robbery of Caitlin Clark is a symptom of a larger problem, where the WNBA is struggling to transition from a niche league to a mainstream powerhouse. They are clinging to their old stars while the new ones are literally carrying the business on their backs. Even the internal dynamics of the teams being rewarded don't make sense. If you were going to give a Liberty player the award, why wasn't it Pauline Astier? She was arguably their most impactful player on the floor during those specific games. But she doesn't have the marketing power that Breanna Stewart has. This proves that the player of the week isn't about basketball. It's about marketing. It's about who the league wants to see on the promotional graphics for the next 7 days. Caitlin Clark is already the most marketed player in history, so perhaps the league felt they didn't need to give her the award to get clicks. The disappointment in Stephanie White's eyes was shared by many across the league who value meritocracy. Players like Satu Sabali and Alicia Gray are also being overlooked in this quest to keep the same 2 or 3 names at the top of the mountain. It creates a ceiling for everyone else. If you aren't part of the chosen circle, your historic performances are treated as footnotes. The league is currently being led by a mafia of media and coaches who have decided that the hierarchy must be respected at all costs. Caitlin Clark is the biggest threat to that hierarchy we have ever seen, and the pushback has been swift and brutal. There's also the issue of how the games are actually officiated and managed. During this week of robbery, we saw Caitlin getting physically targeted on the court with very little protection from the refs. When you combine the physical toll with the mental toll of being snubbed by the league office, it's a wonder she's still performing at such a high level. Stephanie White has had to become more than just a coach. She's become a shield for her star player. She has to call out these unbelievable decisions, because if she doesn't, the league will continue to walk all over the progress they are making in Indiana. Let's talk about the competition again. The Liberty beat the Mystics, a team that has been described as sucking lately. Winning against a struggling team while having a horrific individual performance should not result in an award. Meanwhile, the Fever are playing in the toughest environments against teams that are treating every game against Caitlyn like it's the Game 7 of the finals. The level of difficulty is not being factored into these awards at all. It's a flat comparison of wins and losses that ignores the actual quality of play. It's a lazy way to run a professional league, and it's starting to show the cracks in the WNBA's armor. The Becky Hammon factor cannot be understated here. The pressure that the Las Vegas Aces and the New York Liberty put on the league to keep their players in the headlines is immense. They have built a culture where anything less than total adoration is seen as an attack. This riding for their own is a good thing for team chemistry, but it's a bad thing for the league's overall fairness. It creates a situation where the league is scared to give an award to a rookie because they don't want to deal with the backlash from the veteran superstars. It's high school drama playing out at the highest level of professional sports. Caitlin Clark's stats of 26 points, 9 assists, and a block are not just good for a rookie, they are elite for any human being playing the game of basketball. When you look at the history of the Player of the Week award, players have won it for far less. The only logical conclusion is that there is a concerted effort to keep her from winning too much too soon. They want her to earn her stripes, even if she's already outperforming the people who have been wearing those stripes for a decade. It's a gatekeeping tactic that is designed to keep the power in the hands of the established elite. Stephanie White knows that this is just the beginning. The robbery of this Player of the Week award is a shot across the bow. It's the league telling the Indiana Fever that they aren't going to make it easy, no matter how many records Caitlyn breaks. But what they don't realize is that this kind of blatant disrespect only fuels the fire. Caitlyn has spent her entire career being doubted and overlooked, and every time it happens, she comes back stronger. The WNBA might think they are protecting their veterans, but they are actually just creating a monster that is going to eventually tear down the very walls they are trying to build. The most insulting part of the whole situation is the silence from the league when these discrepancies are pointed out. There is no explanation, no transparency, and no accountability for how these votes are tallied. It's a shut up and play mentality that doesn't work in the modern era of sports. Fans want to know why a player with 26-9 loses to a player with 23-8 who played worse competition. Until the WNBA can answer that question without relying on legacy or reputation, they will continue to face the wrath of coaches like Stephanie White who are tired of seeing their players get robbed. In the end, this isn't just about 1 week in May, it's about the soul of the league. Are we going to reward the best players, or are we going to reward the best brands? Right now, the WNBA is choosing brands. They are choosing the comfort of the past over the excitement of the future. But the future is already here, and her name is Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White is right to lose it, because the integrity of the game depends on awards being earned, not assigned. If the league doesn't fix this bias soon, they risk losing the very audience that Caitlin Clark brought to the table in the first place. The ultimate takeaway from this controversy is that the WNBA is at a crossroads. They can either embrace the changing of the guard and reward the historic performances of players like Caitlin, or they can continue to hide behind the mafia of veteran stars. Stephanie White's outcry is a wake-up call for everyone who loves the game. We have to demand better. We have to demand that the numbers matter more than the names on the jerseys. Until that day comes, every award handed out by the league will have an asterisk next to it, and every robbery will be a reminder of what happens when politics trump talent.